In the second hour, and we're going in the cubicle as we do usually on a Tuesday at the second hour of the show. In every workplace, measuring success is more than just a goal, it's actually a necessity. We do need to measure whether you're really doing the job that you're being paid to do. Key performance indicators, also known as KPIs, give organizations a way to track progress, to stay accountable, but also to ensure that they're moving in the right direction. But we're also highlighting this to show that KPIs aren't just one dimensional. They are in two forms: hard KPIs, which are the numbers that we can count, like sales, productivity, deadlines met, and they're also soft KPIs, which focus on the people side of performance. What are these? How do we see them? But also, how do we meet them? We're speaking about this today with HR specialist Thando Mncube. Thank you so much, Thando, for your time. Good morning.
Good morning, Palesa, and thank you very much for having me again.
It is a pleasure. You know, we're always so happy when we get a new job. We're like, yes, I did it. I passed the interview. I'm amazing. And then we get those documents that say, this is what we need you to do. And sometimes we look at it at face value because we're like, yeah, that's what I was hired for. That's what I know how to do anyway. But how important is it to actually read those documents in depth to really identify what your KPIs are?
Palesa, I think it is quite critical because ultimately we are all here to achieve a common goal. But for us to achieve that goal, we need to know exactly what your part is that you play in it. And a lot of times we think that because I've done it before, it's going to be exactly the same. But different organizations require different things for us. So it's very critical that you are 100% clear on what exactly you're going to be measured on.
Is the document enough? Because I think most of us can read through our contracts, right? But I think also to have that conversation with your manager at the beginning to really expand on what they mean on the document. Because at times we can even misunderstand what is being meant by what is written on paper.
Ben, you're 100% correct. I think it's not just having that conversation in the beginning, but it's an ongoing conversation to make sure that, as you go through the month or the quarter or the year, you are still aligned with what is required of you, and not just your understanding of it. I always say the ideal performance management process is one where if your manager was to win the lotto and leave, anybody can walk in and have a clear understanding of what it is that you're supposed to deliver. So
Sure.
to get to that level of clarity, it requires consistent conversation between yourself and your manager to make sure that you are 100% clear on what is expected of you.
And usually, though, what we're being measured on and the conversations we have with the manager and those KPI reviews have to do with those hard KPIs, right? What's been on paper, what you're contractually obliged to do. But soft KPIs are a little harder to get your head around. Let's speak about those soft KPIs. Let's identify what they are and what they look like.
Sure. So, Palesa, as you mentioned in the beginning with your definition, the hard KPIs are the numbers. It's a sales target. It's either you reached it or you didn't. It's a revenue number. It's either you reached or you didn't. Sales KPIs do tend to be not numerical, and also a little bit less objective or, numbers based. So you can't pull a report from the system. We're talking about things like team cohesion. We're talking about things like employee engagement. We're talking about things like team morale. From a leadership perspective, we're talking about things like the effectiveness of your communication. We're talking about how satisfied the team is that you're leading. And these are not things that you can typically measure on, a system or a scale, but rather require more qualitative feedback about how a person is showing up. I think oftentimes in business, we just think the success is based on the numbers, but the numbers come from the culture, and the culture is what's built by these soft KPIs. And that is why they are so critical for us to define and measure.
That's the thing. You just highlighted something important, that the soft KPIs need to also be defined. I think many companies are expecting those soft KPIs as a given, and they don't even take the time to expand on them or to even translate that messaging to their employees.
That's 100% correct. But there's an old saying that says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Right. So if you look at strategy as an outcome of the hard KPIs, culture is an outcome of those soft KPIs. And again, with everything, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. So if you're not clear about what is the kind of culture that we need to achieve what we want as an organization, and then leading on from that, what then are the soft skills, what are the behaviors, what are the values that we need to drive in this organization to enable that culture, then it doesn't matter how fantastic your strategy is, you're still not, going to fall flat. And you're completely right that we assume that people know these things, but that's not the case, right?
Yeah.
A culture will develop, but it's up to you as an organization if you want to direct what that culture looks like, or if you're going to let it evolve naturally. And typically, when you let it evolve naturally, it's not going to give you the results that you want from a strategy and execution perspective.
You know, sometimes these soft KPIs, Thando, are personality driven, and some people have the personality and some people don't, right? Maybe you are working well with your team, but you just don't have that outgoing personality. Maybe you're a little bit shy. Maybe, you struggle to communicate interpersonally, but you send all the emails that you're supposed to send. And in many companies, they're what people call the personality hire. Someone who doesn't particularly do all those hard KPI things, but because they're flamboyant and they're really good with people, it always feels like they're going and climbing up the ladder. How much must we work on our personality? And does that mean that, just because you don't have the personality for it, that you're not going to reach those soft KPIs?
I think we often assume that those soft KPIs are inherent or personality based, but actually there are things that you can build and work on. So if we use something, for example, like being a team player, not all of us like people. Quite frankly, some of us don't actually like people.
Yeah.
However, there are very specific things that you can do to enable yourself to still excel in that. So whether it's putting a reminder in your calendar to connect with one teammate a week, right? It might not be something that comes naturally to you, but it's still something that you can do. I think, secondly, we are taught, that if you work hard, people will notice your hard work, right? But the reality is, if no one knows the things that you're doing,
Sure.
you're going to sit there and work hard, and we're going to clap hands for you at the end of the year. But that's where it's going to end. So these softer KPIs, the ability to network, the ability to, brag a little bit about the work that you've done, is what's actually going to differentiate you from the guy that does his work fantastically, but sits in his corner and no one knows about him.
Yeah. And it's a difficult one, right? Because you are there just to do the work. I've heard people saying, what else do they want from me? I do what I'm here to do. I get the work done. But you need to think yourself as a complete being, right? And I love the fact that you say that you need to identify things that you can develop, and actually you can also start to build those soft skills. How do you start identifying that this is a soft skill that I'm lacking? How would you see that deficit?
So I think the first thing is understanding the personality of the organization that you're in,
Ah,
right? So take some time to understand what is the formal or defined culture of the organization, but also what are the things that you're picking up over time that, like you're saying, the kind of people that get hired, the kind of people that progress in the organization. And you need to start studying those people to understand, okay, if Ben is the guy that does just enough in terms of the hard skills, but is consistently, outperforming everybody else in terms of performance reviews, what are the things that Ben has that I might not have, and how do I start, stealing one or two of those things? Unfortunately, it's not as clear cut as, it's not the same in every organization. So you actually need to take the time to study and understand what is it that is successful in this organization, and then start building that currency. There are, however, some certain things that we
sure.
know you will always need to be successful, right? The
Mm-hmm.
ability to communicate
Mm-hmm.
professionally is important. The ability to network, which we underestimate, is critical.
Sure.
Another one that you'll never find on a KPI, but it's very important, is understanding that in every corporate environment, there is a level of politics. And if you don't play the politics, unfortunately, the politics will play you.
H.
Now, this is not to say you need to be, cloak and dagger and working
Yeah.
behind people's back, but it's really about knowing how to maneuver the social landscape of that organization.
That final statement is asking us many questions. How do you navigate that, Thando? We'll speak about it after the break. Stay there on the line.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Mozambique's opposition leader Venancio Mondlane has been charged with incitement to terrorism and disobedience. He faces a total of 5 charges. The charges relate to post-election violence that left hundreds of people dead. What punishment is he looking at?
The most severe charges are 2. One is incitement for terrorism, and also is being charged for mobilizing people for terrorism during the protests. These charges are really serious and severe. If he is condemned, is found guilty, he could serve 10 years plus years in jail, meaning that he would be banned from political participation, mainly for the 2028 and 2029 electoral cycle.
The director of CDD, the Center for Democracy and Development, Adriano Novunga.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Step into the heart of the day on the move with Palesa and Benjamin.
It's 22 minutes past 10 o'clock Central African Time, broadcasting live from the SABC in Johannesburg, South Africa, into the continent and the world. This is Channel Africa. You're with myself, Benjamin Moshatama, and Palesa. We're speaking to one of our favorites, Thando Mncube, who is an HR specialist. We like getting practical on our show, so we never give you advice outside of practicalities, and I think Thando does that best. Today we're speaking about KPIs, soft and hard KPIs, and she's helping us navigate these two. And Thando, you were speaking a little bit about the fact that if you don't get into the politics of the office, I thought you should just avoid them. Could you elaborate on that? Because sometimes you might get into the action and you might be associated with the negative groupings. Or sometimes you might stay away and people might think that you're just an absent employee. How do you keep a balance? Because politics can be very harming in the workplace.
So the reality is the politics are there, all right? And politics is not necessarily, like I mentioned, a bad thing. It's really about navigating that social landscape that lies, just under the surface.
Sure.
By choosing to stay away from it, you're still participating in the politics, right? You're still saying, I don't want to have a voice, I don't want to have a say, I don't want to upset this or that person, which in and of itself is still playing the game. I think it is a lot smarter for your career to be intentional about how you get involved, right? To be intentional about who are the people that I need to be on my good books. Because as we know, in all organizations, there's the formal leadership structures and then there's the informal leadership structures. So it is important that you are aware that, you know what, if I upset Palesa, the chances of me progressing in this organization are very low. So I don't have to be Palesa's friend, but I need to make sure that I keep Palesa as an ally, because Palesa can make or break or contribute to making or breaking my career. I'm not by any means, like I said, saying participate in the gossip or the negative culture destroying things, but it's just about being intentional with your brand and how you want your brand to be perceived in the organization.
I agree with that, Thando, but let's speak about the measurability of those soft KPIs versus the hard ones. When it is time for measuring, which happens, every year, sometimes every quarter, depending on the organization, where you're brought in to say, hey, we are now doing a performance review on whether or not you're actually doing the work that you have to do. And sometimes there's money attached to that. Sometimes there's even the job itself that's attached to those KPIs. During those times, you'll find that the management will speak mostly on the hard KPIs, but they don't say, hey, we haven't seen you interacting well with your coach, unless there's been like big altercations that have been happening with you in the office. How do you know then how they are measuring your soft KPIs and if you're actually meeting them?
So I think different organizations look at it differently. I'll give you one example. Is using something like a 360-degree review, right? Where we might say these are our 5 values or behaviors that we expect all our employees to have. And we're going to get a view across your leadership, your peers, and the people that report into you in terms of how you're performing against those things. So that's one of the ways that an organization can objectively gather the data around your soft skills. If we value innovation as a as a cult or a cultural value in this organization, then we will ask a question like, how willing is Thando to come up with new ideas to solve existing problems? But we're not just asking it from your leader, we're asking it from all the way, around the people that you work with, and that's one of the ways to understand it. I think there's nothing that beats feedback. So even outside of a formal 360 review type of process, it is critical if you care about your career and you want to see yourself growing, is to request that feedback. So as an example, I had a project with Ben and Palesa. After the project, asking them for that feedback will give you a view of how you are viewed by other people and what you need to tweak and work on.
Yeah, I love that. Let's go back to the hard skills, because I've seen people who are always relying on that soft skill to navigate themselves around the workplace. And I've seen them being caught in the fire because they've neglected the fact that their performance mainly is based on that hard skill, right?
Yeah.
How do you make sure that you don't just swing into the other side of the equation here, and that you balance the two in a way that is not going to compromise really your real performance, which is you getting the results?
Yeah. So I guess performance management is a what and how game. It's just the nature of the process of performance management. It's about the what and the how. How you do something is irrelevant if you're not doing it at all, right? So you need to be doing something for us to see how you are doing it. So if you look at the hard skills as the what, or the hard KPIs as the what, the soft skills are the how. If I give you a practical example,
Sure.
I have a sales target of, let's call it 10 million Rand. That's the what, right? This is what I need to do. The how is, in my doing this selling of my, achieving of my sales targets, am I doing it according to policy and process? Am I bringing on other team members on board in my negotiating deals? Am I stabbing my colleagues in the back in order for me to get the deals? That's the how. But ultimately, if I wasn't doing the what, we wouldn't even have an opportunity to see how I'm doing it.
And, most people, when it comes to KPIs and they're sitting for that performance, they become very cold in that experience, especially as the employee. They don't give their feedback to what has been said about them. How important is it when you do get that assessment? Maybe you are in a boardroom, maybe you are in a situation whereby it's a digital conversation. How do you need your voice to also be participating in the process of KPI assessments?
If you own your career, I think that's the first step. And what do I mean by that? Step one, when we were determining these KPIs, did I, like we discussed in the beginning, sit with my manager to truly understand what is expected of me? But then, secondly, leading up to that performance review, if I'm going in there waiting to be told, then that's exactly what's going to happen. But if I take the time to sit back and say, well, this is what we've agreed on, here's my portfolio of evidence, this is what I think I've done well, this is what I think I can improve on, then you walk into that boardroom very clear on the points that you want to make. You're also very clear on how your leadership has enabled or hindered your ability to perform. So the conversation is no longer just one way, manager telling you what you've done or not, but you're able to contribute because you took the time to actually prepare for that conversation.
All right, Thando, we'll have to leave it there. I think it's quite an informative conversation we've had, because anybody who's trying to build their career needs to know how to maneuver around their hard and their soft KPIs alike. Thank you so much for giving us your time this morning.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me once again.
Awesome.
That is HR specialist Thando Mncube speaking to us about understanding the hard key performance indicators as well as the soft ones that exist in your work environment. That is